Hey Noah, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, and you?
I'm great. It is so good to have you back and to see you again.
I
I know
am
we haven't
excited to be
done it
back.
in a minute, yeah. But I'm so glad to have you here. I'm just doing some last minute touch up stuff on my end, but I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast. As always, you are what is going on? Okay, as always, you are just a blessing when you join me, and I'm just thankful to have you here back on the
Oh,
speaker podcast and everything. Before we get started, I got to do a couple of little plugs right quick. Then we'll hop into everything. So, hey, everybody, my name is Camille Essick. I'm host of the Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast where entrepreneurs and creators connect. If you haven't heard, I'm now on iHeartRadio. I'm also available on Alexa, tune in. So, if you have the device in your home, you can say, hey, Alexa, play Speaker Podcast, and it will pick up, as well as Spotify and all the other streaming services. And I've also launched my website, www.camilleessick.com, and I have my merch available. The Coffee Lashes Hustle t-shirt is now available on my site. So you go there, you can also connect and pick up the merchandise and follow me on Instagram at camille.essick. And I had to welcome back my brother and friend, Noah Love. So let's welcome Noah, everybody.
hi guys. I'm
Yes,
actually trying to share this now so that I can get these
no
people in
problem.
before they kill me.
Thank you. And
But
thank you.
I am happy to be back.
Yes, and thank you, Sharnika, for tuning in. Thank you so much, sis. For those that are not familiar with you, Noah, let everyone know who you are and what a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I am Noah Love. I am CEO and founder of I Models NYC, a all-inclusive agency. We specifically focus on models of color, but we're very inclusive. I am the co-founder of BNF Productions. We produce New York Fashion Week year-round, as well as workshops for networking and kind of just expanding the Black community's reach into the fashion industry. I am also a podcast host of Noah Love Online. Um, I am a soon to be published author in the 2021 year. I am a big brother. I am an uncle. I'm a son. And I'm just another individual on this beautiful, beautiful planet of what we call Earth, and just happy to be here and contributing in any way possible every single day.
Thank you so much. Now, when that book drops, I need the exclusive on that. I need you to come back to the show.
Absolutely.
We need to talk about,
Absolutely.
and actually, some of the things we're going to talk about tonight is leading to the book. So
Yes.
they're kind of getting a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a little insider, a little prequel, a little sneak peek as to what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
And Sharonika is telling you congratulations. Also, shout out
Thank you. Thank you.
to Ramon Jackson and Brittany Green. Thank you for tuning in. And if you are just tuning in, hit the comment button, like, share, post. If you have a question, drop it in.
Mm-hmm.
This is an open forum. So, touching on the book, let's go back because, of course, everybody's plugging brands. But I created this
Mm-hmm.
podcast as a space for entrepreneurs to be able to share their story, their journey, and do so in a space that's safe, without judgment, and in a space of
Mm-hmm.
transparency. So before New York Fashion Week, before I Am Model, A Models, everything, the book, take us back, Noah, to coming to New York City and where you were at that time in your life. What was life like for you, and just the space you
Mm-hmm.
were in at that time?
So I think I mentioned before on the last episode that I was on with you, moving to New York City has always been a dream. It has always been in the cards for me. I've gone on record and saying God has called me to New York City, but the year before moving, I was in a relationship. I was going through some really tough times with my parents, and just ultimately eager to find myself. And so, honestly, moving to New York City really was a cry for help. It was my kind of breakout of jail, if you will. That year, I moved here in 2010, so 2009. Um, I hadn't spoken to my mom for a while because she suffers from an addiction, and she had like gone ghost for a while. I was in a relationship and then ended that relationship to get back with an ex because I considered this person my soulmate. Everything to me, dropped everything, literally shifted everything. And that relationship went sour very quickly, and that it almost like parlayed into my relationship with my dad, where we were arguing and we just weren't talking. We were living in the same house at this point, but we weren't talking. And I felt like I let everyone around me down at this point. Um, I bought this one-way ticket maybe a couple of months prior to moving, and I remember sitting in my room in my dad's house, ready to take my own life. Like a bottle of pills sitting next to me, and I felt I had nothing left to offer life. I
So
had
what
absolute
was your life that got you to that point where you felt like, you know what, I can't do this anymore?
yeah.
Like, what was
So
going on that got you to that point?
honestly, it really was searching for validation, if you will. It's not necessarily from the world, it's from my parents. It's having that understanding or having that feeling that I was doing something right.
Mhm.
I think at that time, I was like 2021, nothing was clicking. You know, when you become of age, at least you have either some form of income, you have a consistent job, or you have a really great relationship with your family, or you have really great friends. I didn't have any of that. I
So
was just kind of coasting.
how old were you at this time?
Um, I had to be 21,
So you were around early 20s, early 20s?
21, yeah, early 20, early, yeah, 2021. Because yeah.
Okay.
So, and it was just that I knew that I wanted more for myself. I just didn't know how to go about getting it, and nothing was working. Um, and honestly, it was just you're talking about everything from having to deal with the traumas of life. So growing up, essentially bouncing house to house, school to school. Um, my mother at one point being on welfare and just not doing anything to get past that point. My dad being completely consumed in his alcohol addiction and drug addiction, and dealing with his own demons, didn't have necessarily the space to be a nurturing father. He was a present father at that point, but he wasn't a nurturing father. Um, my brothers then having to deal with the fact that, okay, big brother is aging out, not going to be here, looking to leave. And it's all of that energy of people feeling let down. It's parents feeling like they missed out and they didn't get an opportunity to do a perfect job. My dad still tosses with this idea that he wasn't a good father because he missed out. You know, in my mind, even currently today, I feel like my mom just tapped out at some point. And I know better than that, but
She's
it's
having
truth.
her own demons, you know.
Right. And, as a child, I had to accept that truth of them dealing with their own demons at an early age. So I wasn't in that space where the regular 10-year-old was like, why isn't mommy here? I knew exactly why my mom wasn't present. I
Mhm.
knew exactly why my dad wasn't present. So all of that leading up to 2010,
Mhm.
um,
So coming
I
out,
got into that
you
space.
were emotionally absent, and then
Hmm.
and you were just like, okay, I need a switch. So you come to,
Yes.
okay.
Hmm. So I come to New York. I moved here literally. I remember the morning that I moved, or rather got on the flight. My dad took me to the airport, and his exact words to me were, "You're gonna fall on your face, and when you do, I'll pick you up from the airport." My dad, in a very honest way, wanted me to and expected me to fail. being being me to my family, Demetrius, or Heavy D or D, um, I got on that plane with a vengeance that because you were expecting me to fail,
I'm gonna,
even if I had to sleep on a bench in Central Park, and these were our exact conversation, if I have to sleep on a bench in Central Park, I'm not coming back.
mm,
And I think I had 500, maybe some 500 odd dollars in my pocket, landed, and I went to some location that I found on Craigslist to rent a room,
mhm.
and that turned out to be a scam. So I lost a good chunk of my money with that. I got lucky because I rented another space, and they were gracious enough to give me some grace period to pay for my deposit.
Mhm.
And I think I lived in that one bedroom at like 148 a week for maybe 2 months
Mhm.
before the apartment owner was evicted, and then I was left with nothing.
Mhm.
Like it was just because I
Take,
haven't thought about this moment in a while. So
no, take your time.
literally, I'm like bringing
Yeah,
all this together. But
yeah. And I
the
want you to
first
know
year,
this space is safe. Like I want you to know this is a space, safe space. So take
no,
your
yeah,
time.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first year, I ended up being pushed out of that apartment, and then I ended up staying with a cousin of mine on my mom's side, and I was there for a while until I was asked to leave. And when I was asked to leave, I didn't have any friends or anybody in New York City, and I just happened upon um, an interaction with a guy that I met online. We were having conversation, we were becoming friends, and I expressed my story to him, and he offered me to stay at his place. I was sleeping on the floor. Um, that didn't last too long. Then a coworker that I was working with at the time offered for me to stay there, but then that got a little crazy because if it wasn't money, then there were
There was
insinuations of like sexual favors. I was like, oh, this isn't for me.
right
Um,
strings attached.
and then I ended up, yeah, and then I ended up having to make a decision of living in a shelter. And living in shelters in New York City isn't one that you take lightly
Mhm.
because you are essentially putting your life in danger. Um, and so I made that decision and I told no one. I didn't tell family, I didn't tell friends, and it wasn't out of pride. I didn't want that topic or that offer of you can come home.
Mhm.
I didn't want that option because had that option been presented to me, I would have come back. And
Mhm.
so I made a conscious decision to fight and lived in a shelter for a while, worked my behind off, and I just took the little bit of faith that I had left in that moment. And I went and looked at this apartment, and um, it was October 25th when I took the lease. I moved in with no deposit. I was able to give the deposit November 1st. Um, and no, sorry, got the keys November 1st and gave my deposit and my month's rent by the end of the month. And I've been here ever since. That's 10 years ago.
Wow. So when you were in the moment in the shelter, was there a breaking point? Were you just like, God, look, um, what's going on?
Hmm.
Because I know there's things that you've told me, things you've shown me, and I'm at the breaking point where all you can do is like, if you, I don't know, did you say a prayer? Did you pick up a Bible?
Yeah,
What did you have that Damascus quote unquote moment, or what was that moment
yeah.
like for you where you just like, okay, God, like this, something's got to give.
So during the shelter point, I was or rather working my way back into a habit of praying because at this point I was like, there was no way that my prayers are at all getting to God. I felt like, God, I misheard you. I moved to New York City too early, all of these things. And that's directly tied to other communications from parts of my family that just told me that God wasn't listening to me because I was gay. But I just
Oh,
started,
well, run that back.
so,
Say that.
okay. So I think for most people, and again, to your audience, if you need us to break anything down or revisit something, not taking over your show, Camille, but please just mention it in the chat so I can make sure I clarify it. But growing up gay in a Black home specifically,
Mhm.
we are often taught that our sin is the greatest sin and that God's not listening to us. My prayers won't get to him. And I'm talking about conversations specifically said to me as a child,
Mhm.
being told that, well, nephew, you making this life decision, you know God not gonna listen to you. Or grandson, you know, you praying, but I hope you don't expect too much because God frowns on the homosexuals. Um, and despite me being arrogant and extremely hard-headed, those things seep in if it's been told to you enough. So you're talking about somebody, and I mentioned this in my book in a chapter called Praying in Fear. When I pray with this, I didn't have an expectation that God was going to listen to my prayers and answer my prayers. So during this whole shelter situation, it was praying out of mere God, if by chance you hear me. And so it was the praying of that, is the reading the word, because I then at that point realized I needed something. I need one last saving grace. And the Bible really was. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to venture through the Bible. Like, people can they know where to go for particular messages and where to bounce to. I did the one thing that my mom always taught me: just open your Bible. So every morning I opened a physical Bible and I just read what was there. And you're talking about going through Genesis, Matthew's, Psalms, Revelations, Corinthians. Um, what is it? Oh, where's my mom? Where's the book that my mom gave me? But there's a book. Is it Corinthians? And that's what saved me.
Mm-hmm.
Is having this understanding of what that love from God genuinely looked like for his people, and that I was included in that number.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those prayers of God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like you called me here. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to obey. And it sounded crazy to me. It felt crazy. But I was terrified living in this shelter. I was terrified of still living in this lie because people felt like, or I was giving this thought or this idea that I was doing fine in New York City
Were
because
you
I was still
that
pushing.
imposter syndrome? Do you think you're
That wasn't even imposter syndrome. That was me being an imposter. And I can say that with a healthy heart. I was faking it. I was putting on a facade because my facade protected my family.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to be concerned. They didn't have to worry, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that for a while as a safeguard for myself and what I thought was protecting my family. But
So
again, the prayers just kept going, and I was just like, God, I just don't know what to do. I have nothing left. I don't know where to go, what's happening. And the first move was looking for the apartment. And because I got the apartment, my work ethic just a little shifted. And my faith and my prayer shifted because I was like, oh, wait a second, you did this with nothing. That was my first example of God moving in my favor, and I had nothing.
so that
I
fueled you
didn't.
to continue on.
Absolutely. It was the solidifying point where I was like, okay, so perhaps I am a child of God. Perhaps he is listening to me. Perhaps he is actually governing my steps. And so, I moved into my apartment and my mind shifted toward how I was working and what I was doing. Because at this point, and I think this is probably the healthiest my relationship has ever been with God because I was at my very lows. And, that song is, when we are weak, he is strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was my first piece of that. And then I started reading more and just reading books in general and journaling and piecing together what I wanted my life to be. And I started trusting God that he was going to do that in which what I felt like he was calling me to. So who you see today is a entire remanifestation of what I understood from God. And, when you mentioned earlier about the imposter syndrome, the facade that I was presenting to people, it was me protecting myself and essentially protecting my family, but I was putting forth a crazy version of me that hadn't existed yet. I was putting forth what I wanted to be, and I've worked to that. So the very person you're seeing now is what I was working in back then. I was putting that image forward. Um, but yeah.
That's amazing. We're just gonna pause right quick because we've had some others to join in, and we're gonna just reset. So for those that are, if you're just tuning in, my name is Camille Essick. I'm the host of the Speaker Podcast. Tonight, my guest is Noah Love. We are discussing his journey surviving molestation, homelessness, and just overcoming as a whole. And those that are entering the room, we want to say thank you to Paula.
Oh, my aunt's there. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Elizabeth, we'll call her Lizzie. Hi, Lizzie. Because that's her Elliot.
Yeah, Gazetta Elliott, that's my aunt. Courtney Burney is my best friend, my god brother, my ace.
And Stephen Yates, thank you for joining us. And Courtney
Thank
Burney.
you, guys.
Yeah, so thank you all for tuning in. And be sure to like and comment and share and post this episode. And just jumping back in. So previously when you were here on the podcast, you discussed,
Mhm,
you touched on it lightly about being molested. So how did
mhm.
you overcome that trauma? What space did that put you in, and then how did you overcome that trauma?
So first, I'm gonna give you this because I had to rehearse this piece of the conversation yesterday because every time I talk about it, or because I was preparing to talk about it, I get emotional because you're the very first person that I'm talking about this with. And it wasn't
And I'm gonna say thank you for trusting me with your story. So thank you.
No, of course. When it came up in our last conversation, it was just so natural. And I love that you provide this safe space, but it's more so about a safe space. It's more so about the idea that, you know, this is a conversation that not many Black men have. We don't talk about it in an open space. And so, but
I mean, it's a taboo subject because there's a image to a degree. Sometimes
mhm,
I feel like there's a level of toxic masculinity that's associated with Black men,
yes.
and there are so many Black men that have gone through it, but
Mm-hmm.
they haven't opened up and talked about it. I had
Right.
Knox on a previous episode, and he shared with me his, experience as a Black male being sexually assaulted as a child. And
Mm-hmm.
as more Black men open up and discuss it, it's more common than we realize.
Mm-hmm. Um, my first incident happened, and the only way that I can timeline this is I was in third grade at Comstock Elementary School. We were living in this home with a house directly in back of me, and I always try to remember this house, or not rather, I know this house because it would then become the house next door to my mother's husband's, my stepfather's mother's house. But there was a young girl that babysat us. And I remember going into the schoolyard directly across the street from our house. And we were just playing house. And this young lady who was babysitting us, um, playing house, playing mommy, and she makes me touch her breast. This is, I'm not sure how traumatic you can put this on or what scale you can use between traumatic and oh my God, traumatic. But these visuals, that emotion, that fear still very much exists in me today. If I close my eyes, I'm in that moment and it is the most terrifying thing. And it's more so terrifying because it is obviously an unwanted gesture. And it is a unknown gesture at a child at that particular age on third grade. I'm not sure how old that is, but um, it was both fearful and frustrating because at that point I knew that my mother wasn't in a space to understand or present enough to do anything to protect me or how I felt. And then I also just, it was a fear of if I didn't do this, what would the reaction or retaliation be? Um, And then I remember her doing that and then touching my genitals and all I remember just sitting there and you know how you just phase out. And so that was the first incident. And I remember this happening for a bit of time. And I said nothing to anyone, but I also said nothing because I've always been in that space where I felt like I had to protect my mother. And so giving her extra stresses, I knew what triggered her addiction. And so I internalized all of that. And I didn't allow it to, as a child, I don't think I allowed it to, I don't think I let it force me into a scared or sad space. It
Yeah,
just kind of
I think,
fueled.
not to cut you off, but I think a lot of parents do things and then move in a certain way because they're like, oh, my son, my daughter, if I move like this, they won't notice or pick up. But children are very observant and
Mhm,
see, hear, feel more than a parent could ever realize.
mhm,
And the things, little things, and kids are smart and they know how to
mhm,
put the two together. So you think, oh, little Noah, little Cam, little Brittany, little Courtney, they don't know what's going on. Yes, your child
right. We're very
realizes,
much aware,
very aware. Yeah.
very much aware. And, you know, that first incident and me being that young, I, in so many ways, or the best way I knew to as a child, just kind of brushed it off. And then um, in fifth grade, I went back to an old school, Maya Angelou, and I was, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first year. Yes, after school, I was a theater kid. We had a theater teacher, Ms. Palmer, and then we had our principal. Forget this white man's name. Forgive me, God, and forgive me for calling him a white man, but that's what he was. Um, but we spent a lot of time at school, and school was my safe space. It was where I ran to get away from home, and so any opportunity I was at school. And there's a program at school where you get to shadow a teacher.
Mhm.
I didn't choose my teacher. My principal chose me. And I don't think that was a telltale sign for anybody, for the principal to immediately just like, no, Mr. Love will be with me.
Take your time. Take a deep breath. It's okay.
I remember going to school for this day, going into the principal's office with him, sitting at the desk, and just starting the day, regular day, going over paperwork, and sitting at the desk and him first rubbing the shoulder, and then walking through the school, we're going over everything, just pretending to be the principal. And lunchtime, instead of me eating in the cafeteria, I'm eating lunch with him in his office. And this is where the hugging and the touching my hands, and all I could remember telling myself is just that, okay, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And 3 o'clock comes, walk out of school. My brothers, I go to theater rehearsal. Genesis goes to dance. Eddie is in aftercare. We walk home and my mother is high. My mother is high. And I wanted to break so very badly. I remember this as if it were yesterday. I wanted to break so very badly. And the moment I saw her face, it was, okay, Genesis and Eddie have to eat, we can take a shower, we have schoolwork, and that was it. And that's been,
Are you the
that
oldest?
was, I'm the oldest boy. I have 3 sisters, but they lived in separate, they were in a separate home.
Okay. So you going to
And
autopilot.
so,
I gotta take care of my siblings.
right, that was my life for a very long time, where it was just, every time that I was having a moment, I remembered my brothers. And people often ask me now why I talk about them so much, is because the moment I remember that I have 2 brothers in this world, there was this regeneration of strength in me. But yeah, so that happened, and that's what it's always been. And again, I also did, and this is very, very honest, because I didn't tell anyone or mention anything about molestation or rape ever, because I never wanted that to be the subject of reasoning behind me being a gay male. I knew way before I was forced to touch a breast that I was gay. I knew before my principal put his hands on me that I was gay. I didn't want anyone to connect those two as reasoning, or at least when I became of age to understand that verbiage, I didn't want that to be a thing. So even, when I became a teenager, I didn't speak about it because I didn't want that to be reasoning. The very last time that I won't say I think, that I was sexually assaulted, it was by my very first, what I considered, boyfriend. I was a sophomore in high school at Carroll City Senior High School. We were living at the apartment building directly behind the school. And it was for the most part, it was a very rough area, so to speak. We won't call it ghetto, but it was rough. And I found a connection with this guy that was way older than me. And I called myself dating him. I wasn't having sex with anyone yet. I wasn't doing anything. But this guy who just happened to also sling dope around the apartment building, I felt safe. I felt validated because he saw me. He walked me to school. He came to get me after school. He told me he loved me. But I wasn't sexually empowered at this point in my life. Like, I really genuinely wasn't concerned about sex. I don't know if it was because I wasn't comfortable in my body, or I don't know, but just I wasn't that sophomore riled up by boys or girls. And I remember sitting in his car, and again, the touching and the feeling and all of that stuff, and then me saying, no, that's not what I want. And it continuously going and going and going, to the point of him, sorry audience, trying to jerk me off. And I felt forced to stay. So you're talking about the very first sexual assault, like extreme. And I said nothing because at that point I felt like that was my fault. And I couldn't say anything to anybody because I hadn't come out technically. And at this point I was living with my dad. So this is where there's a mix between middle school and high school. I went through a transition from where my mother had just went on her last binge, and we were living with my stepfather at the time, and he had had enough, and we had no other choice. My brother called my grandmother called my aunt. She came and got me and my brothers, and then we ended up living with my dad. But again, he was still dealing with his alcoholism and his drug addiction. So now I have another parent who not only has a drug addiction, but also has an alcohol addiction and is emotionally unavailable and in a very toxic relationship.
So you're in a space where you're not able to purge, discuss, talk, open up because everyone around you, they're emotionally checked out because they're battling their own demons. Then there's, of course, the stigma of molestation within itself. Then you
Mm-hmm,
being a Black male on top of that. So then there's
mm-hmm,
another stigma on top of that. So
mm-hmm.
in that space, Noah, why do you feel like I feel like I kind of know, but what is your take on why do you feel like so many Black men that experience this because of within our community, um, the stereotype of what a Black man is, over masculine, hyper masculine personality, that this conversation is not had on a regular basis for people to heal. And then there are some that have gone on to be heterosexual male, married with kids, whatever, but then they're carrying the secret. Like, so can you kind of break that down?
So one, I don't account for it in the books that I've read, the seminars that I've listened to. Molestation for men does not lead to homosexual tendencies or activities. That's not a science. It's not a fact. A man that is a gay man is a gay man prior to and after, sometimes destroyed and just not sexual at all. But I don't think we talk about it because there is this idea, because I am a man with a penis, that I can't be assaulted. I can only do the assaulting. And I don't care how that's explained or broken down across the board. That is a single reason. And specifically because Black women don't understand that. Not all Black women. That's what the issue is. And then Black men, oh no, son, it's okay. You wanted it. It felt good. Like, it's a thing where if you say, I'm not interested and I don't want to have sex with you, and a woman throws herself at you, she pushes herself on you, you are then questioned. And then specifically for heterosexual men who are assaulted sexually, it's, you didn't want it. Are you gay? And that's unfair to question any man's sexuality if he is expressing assault. You know, when women, obviously, when, a woman says she's been sexually assaulted, we pity her, which I never want to believe that a woman has to be pitied, more so that she needs to be protected. Sexual assault shouldn't happen to anyone. If you say that you were assaulted, I'm not going to pity you. I need to find out why this happened, where did this happen, and what we need to do about it. In my situation, I don't think my dad would have questioned my sexuality. Perhaps he would I feel like my dad would have went into overdrive to protect me. My dad comes from the streets of the streets. My dad is like kingpin, so to speak, in Miami, Florida. Like, my dad, like, holster, like, roll up in your house, like, through your windows at night. And
People don't.
again, I've always felt like I've had to protect my parents. So
Right.
even when I was living with my dad full time, there were certain things that I did not say, that I did not do, because I didn't want my dad to be angry. I didn't want him to react, and I didn't want him to binge. When we talk about when we talk about molestation, and this is my example, and this is how I know, or for me, I did the right thing. My dad was accused of touching me inappropriately. I was 15 years old, and he was accused of touching me inappropriately. And this infuriated me. Like, it pissed me off.
It wasn't true.
And it wasn't true, by no means. My dad never, I am my dad's pride and joy amidst everything that we have been through. My dad loves me. But when my dad talks to me, my dad hugs me, my dad holds my shoulder, my dad may punch me if he's trying to get a point across, he may grab my face. That is my father. Um, and usually when my dad, at back in the day, if we were talking, we were usually talking in the parking lot of the apartment building. He wanted to make sure we were in open space, clean air, so that I could breathe and digest his information. And a family member, and I talk about this in my book, my relationship with my dad. A family member accused him of this, and it broke his heart. When my dad is hurt or fragile, it doesn't reflect in a way that you and I may be hurt, where we cry and we call our friends and we sob and we try to figure out why. My dad wants to hurt somebody.
He's from
And
Miami.
so, right. And so, but this also drives him to drink and then to partake in his drug choice a little heavier. And we were having a conversation. Outside the apartment building. And I remember my dad talking to me. And the next day, this family member came and asked me about it because we were talking about that accusation and he wouldn't tell me who it was. But then this family member approached me about the conversation and asked me, did your dad touch you inappropriately? And the same anger I think my dad felt, I felt. I'm my father's child, like 100%. I have his attitude. And so, there are certain things that I won't say or I won't bring to his attention because I don't want him to move back into a space that he would regret later.
Mm-hmm.
The same way I didn't want my mom to suffer because of what my lacking was or what was hurting me. What she was dealing with was already enough. What he was dealing with was already enough. I don't want to put more on your plate. I can take care of me. And so I think anyone in my family knows I can distance myself without question. And I do it in protection. I specifically do it in protest for my brothers. If you can hurt me, you can get to my brothers. So I can't let that happen.
Right.
So my relationship.
And when you're going through all that with your relationships, where do you go to unplug to let all that out? Because there's been so much you've gone through as far as these traumas. So did you do therapy? Mm-hmm. Like, how did you pull out of all that to get to where you are right now, where you have your modeling agency, your photography brands, and modeling yourself and working with New York Fashion Week as an entrepreneur, as a brand ambassador, and creating a space for people that look like us in the fashion industry. So coming out of all that, what was that process like for you, and where do you go to unplug?
So obviously I didn't go through therapy when I was in Miami and growing up. I moved to New York, and prior to therapy was books. There's a book by, I'm gonna forget her name right now, but it's called If You Have to Cry, Go Outside. And in this book, it tells you that when you are in the presence of your work or people that you respect or attend to or aspire to be, you are to be the best version of yourself. Remove yourself from the space and purge everything that hinders you. And so up until moving to New York City, I didn't cry much. I was an emotional person, but I didn't cry too much. I think my biggest cries were probably because relationships were failing. But when I moved to New York City, I learned how to cry in the space of my home. I learned how to cry in a bathroom.
Did you cry for young Noah? Like, did you?
A lot.
Yeah, okay.
A lot. I went through a process of I'm not gonna say mourning, but sympathy for that young boy, because it was what he grew up in was unfair. At no point did I have a childhood. I was not a child. I didn't have a childhood. I wasn't that kid who could freely play outside. I wasn't that kid who could make mistakes and be okay. I wasn't the child who said, "Oh, you got a boo-boo, that's fine." No. I was the child, D, your brother's got to eat. D, did your brothers do your homework? Did you guys go to school? We need groceries. I didn't pay the phone bill. We got to call and get an extension. Go buy groceries. D, go get my beer. D, I need cigarettes. Go ask so-and-so for this. I didn't have a child. At no point. My first job was at 11 years old. Now, given my first job was 11 years old sorry, my phone, gotta get a charger. My first job was at 11, 12 years old. Given I was going to work with my dad during the summer, but my money was going to the house. Mm-hmm. It was going to my mother. But yeah, so I cried and I've mourned. And when I say mourn, I've had to let that little boy die. I've had to give that back because it has happened. It has happened, and in so many ways today, I'm appreciative of it.
So now with that you grieve, quote unquote, I don't want to say the death, but the loss of childhood as mm-hmm. Noah the boy. Mm-hmm. How do you speak to your inward self as Noah the man and going through that process now?
There's a lot of gratitude now. So when I talk to myself and when I have those moments of, I wish I had a perfect family. I wish my dad was present for this. I wish my mom this, there's a form of gratitude that I am everything that that little boy dreamed of. I've always had big dreams. I've always had big dreams of the city. I've always had this idea that I was going to be my brother's savior, that I was going to be this rock star. And so now I have gratitude for the fact that I be at at very best, that little boy has reached his point of arrival. And that was the only way that I was able to put him to rest, because amidst all of that, and we're speaking in third person, amidst all of that, that little boy didn't give up. He didn't die. He didn't get mad. He has no hate in his heart. It is amazing for a child to have to grow up so quickly and still have no hate.
Many
And
of
it's
us,
funny because
many of us
I have to look. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's a win. That's God.
Mm-hmm.
That's God. And I use it as an example because I have a total of 5 siblings. I have 2 brothers, 3 sisters. And our relationships with our mother are completely different. My mother is essentially still very much my best friend. I consider her my best friend despite what we have gone through. Jennifer that's my girl. I love her. And when you say, where did I have space to purge or time? Even though I couldn't tell my mother my deepest hurts and pains, my mother and I had conversations. My mother could trust me. I know my mother's traumas through and through. I know what she went through as a child. I know everything that contributes to her being damaged today. And it humbles me and it shows me the level of love that she has for me, because my mother saw me as a safe space. I may not have been able to see her as a safe space, but my mother knew that she was safe with me no matter what. You know, the same thing with my dad. My dad knew for a fact, as long as D was around, he was good. Because there's one thing that God has given me, is that when it comes to my family, that's it. I'm going to whatever I have to. I know how to, I may not be able to financially protect those around me at all times, but I quickly learned what interceding was. I knew what it meant to step in between when necessary. My dad isn't the most church going person, but God is giving me this gift where I can look at you and know what you need. And I know how to intercede on your behalf I know how to cover you. And both my parents, I feel like, respect that about me, that that I love them enough to be able to do that. And you know, again, with all of this that I've shared, my parents are my world. My dad's technically my best friend now. I love this man. We talk when we have conversations. They go for an hour, or hours rather, but I'm at a space in life where God has released me from that. He has allowed, he's used that as a stepping stone, literally. Like, it is a blessing that I had to go through what I went through, and I dealt with it essentially by myself, and it didn't destroy me. And so those are moments that I remember God is good.
Yeah.
Those are moments that I remember, like, when I couldn't talk to anybody and I couldn't verbally say these things, God knows your heart. He has those internal conversations with us. And I'm grateful for that. And I have to mention this because I would be remiss, but I also feel like it's a missing point. And I have to say it because her name just popped up as she was commenting. My Aunt Gazetta is the most beautiful person. She is my mom's baby sister, but she has been a fixture in my life from the moment I was born. She is someone who at my lowest has always been there. We share our love with each other in an open space, and she's always been a supportive individual. My aunt is that person who showed up to my school when I needed money for lunch or money for a field trip. She showed up with groceries when my mom couldn't get them. She came to the house to pay for our light bill when we couldn't pay it. She made sure that I was good. And, you know, she's that aunt who had the perm, the silk press, and she drove the Altima. So when you saw the Altima show up, you knew everything was going to be good. And I have fond memories of her showing up anywhere, anytime
We want to
in her
thank
U.S.
you.
Postal uniform.
Yes, thank
Um,
you for tuning in so much. And honestly, I want to thank you for sharing your story and being
mhm,
transparent, because I feel like even though this is your first time openly talking about it, and like I said earlier, thank you for trusting me and my platform to share your journey. I want you to know, as you continue to talk and have this conversation, it may not feel like it, but you are helping someone. And uh, I think your journey is amazing and is going to get even better. The book that you have coming out is going to bless so many lives, particularly Black men that have gone through what you've gone through. This is a conversation that needs to be had, and it is going to continue to be had. And in that space, I think God will continue to give you healing and the closure that you need, not only for little Noah, but grown man Noah. And even in your industry, your light, your joy. From the moment we connected on social media till now, you know, I think you're a beautiful person and I love you.
love
There's not
you.
a time that I haven't laughed or you made me smile, or just, I don't know, you're just a very genuine, caring person. It's not fake or just, girl, you know, it's just, you
Mhm.
are you. And I appreciate you for being just authentic you. So I just want to say thank you so much
Oh, you know, I love you so very much, and you made me blush. I don't like blushing.
for that. So with that being said, I'm definitely going to bring you back because I want to have some other conversations with you as we go into 2021. So we'll, you know, we talk all the time anyway. But for those that
Mhm.
are not familiar with you or would like to connect with you, let the people know where they can connect with you on social media.
Sure. So you guys can follow me literally anywhere. It's I am Noah Love on Instagram. My Facebook public page or fan page is I am Noah Love. If you're on Clubhouse, the real Noah Love, that is where I live currently on Clubhouse 24/7. Camille,
And we
thank
have the
you
after show
for
on
having me.
tonight. Yes.
Yes, I'm excited about that. That is
Yes.
going to be, as the kids say, lit. But thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be in your space. Like, no matter where we connect on whatever platform, or even just via text, you are a necessary energy in this world. You are a necessary spirit, and you know when you open your mouth to speak, it isn't propaganda. It isn't lip service. It isn't just this facade. You are someone sharing a vital experience that benefits all of us. I listen to you in multiple clubhouse rooms, and you bless me every time. Your messages and your rants on Instagram are phenomenal, and you know your podcast, your space that you give to entrepreneurs and specifically those of color, we find solace in being able to connect with you and your audience. It's amazing, and I'm just grateful.
Oh no, thank you. But we're not doing this. I'm hosting, not you. I'm not doing so, no. The lashes are gonna stay on. So but thank you so much for your kind words. I really, really appreciate it. And if you guys love this conversation, in
Yes,
about 10 minutes, we're gonna hop on Clubhouse to do a recap of after party, after show. Noah's gonna
it's gonna be
co-moderate.
so good.
It's gonna be so good.
I
So
cannot wait.
I know. So for those, again, Noah, thank you so much for sharing. We're going to bring you back. The listeners and the viewers, thank you for tuning in. This is your host, Camille Essick. This is the Speaker Podcast, the podcast where entrepreneurs and creators connect. And you guys have a blessed evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.